Prescription authenticity is very important. Those who forge prescriptions, faking prescriptions, is a crime, punishable under the law, and ought to be reported to the police when it's discovered. So those who work in a field where they have to fill prescriptions, look at prescriptions, ought to look for the following things that might be an indication that a prescription has been forged or is fraudulent. So we just want to go over some of those indicators that might raise some red flags, might make you somewhat suspicious, something that ought to be looked into further so that you might truly know whether or not a prescription is authentic. So we begin with the quantity specified in the prescription. If excessive quantities are prescribed, that may be an indication that the prescription is itself fraudulent. There are standard quantities of many drugs that are given out, and if you work in this field, you come to rely on those standard quantities and recognize those quantities. If you get one that suddenly shows an excessive quantity, is way outside the margins of what's standard, then that should raise a red flag. There may be an issue here as to the authenticity of this prescription. Second, as you're looking at the prescription, are things overwritten? Have things been erased? Are there a way to obscure what's there and maybe something else put in its place? This ought to raise red flags. Next, is the signature under which the prescription is given unusual or completely unrecognizable? Now, that may make some of us laugh because we know most doctors' handwriting is unrecognizable. Their signatures the same way, but you can tell things that perhaps are common in signatures and other things that just look like someone squiggled something out. Or the signature itself, if you're used to seeing it, suddenly looks much different. It's an unusual signature. So looking at the signature, is there something unusual about it, or is it just a scribble that's so unrecognizable it doesn't even look like the proper signature for that particular doctor? Once again, things to look for in a prescription that's submitted. Has it been photocopied? You're not getting the original, you're getting a copy from a copy machine. That's a problem. Under the spelling out of what's in the prescription, is there absolutely no use of standard medical abbreviations? Things that would be fairly common from a doctor's office, suddenly you get a prescription that's fully spelled out. You might start to raise some red flags there. Why are the common medical abbreviations not used? Well, the person who wrote the prescription doesn't know them, isn't aware that there are common medical abbreviations used. This should raise a strong red flag in your mind. Also, if you get a prescription that's too neat, too legible, it doesn't look ordinary, like an ordinary person just filled it out. They're going out of their way to say, well, I don't want it to look illegible, then they'll suspect it, so I will be hyper neat. Well, that also raises red flags. Also, if there are different colors of ink used, so it starts black and finishes blue, that might be an indicator that something's wrong there. Someone didn't even bother to match up the color ink when they wanted to change the prescription to something else. And then obvious mistakes. Things that a professional would never make a mistake in, the amateur is more than likely going to make a mistake in spelling things like this. So different colored ink, obvious mistakes. If there are problems or if you are uncertain about the authenticity of a prescription, it's always good to collaborate to bring others in for further evaluation. And once it's concluded, if it is concluded that this particular prescription is fraudulent, once again, it is a crime and it needs to be reported to the police, and that's what we have down here. If you find a fraudulent prescription, report it to the police to be dealt with appropriately. So once again, the authenticity of prescriptions, very critical, very important. Here are some of the things to be aware of, to be on the lookout for that might raise red flags so that you can look into them further and verify the authenticity of a prescription. If something is found to be fraudulent, turn it over to the police. If you'd like to learn more about this and related topics, underneath this video there's a link. If you'll click on it, it'll take you to that web page where you can find that information. And while you're on that web page, you'll also find a link to an ebook that's ready for immediate download.